Hi, everybody. So we know that this event is called We Have Something to Say, Elder Black Lesbian Writers. And what I wanted to say is that we all know that representation matters. Today, we've got 4 Black lesbian feminist writers, Anne Shockley, SDiane Bogus, Sharon Bridgforth, and Penny Mickelbury, who definitely got something to say. And they've been saying it for quite some time. As a Black Asian lesbian in a mostly white organization, I'm beyond thrilled, excited, and also very proud to welcome all of you to this event. 2 of the writers have been publishing since the 70s, with the other 2 since the 90s. And if you think back to the 70s, you may consider publishing anything as a lesbian to be a feat, and to publish as a Black lesbian miraculous. I know that many of us have read and enjoyed their work. Please go to the full biographies and list of publication links for more complete information. So let's get started.
So it appears that we had invited Blanche Jackson to read the piece from Anne Shockley. She very much was interested in this event, but did not feel like she herself could participate. But she had given us her blessing to have someone else read from her writing, Loving Her. So I'm still trying to get a hold of Blanche, and I'm hoping that she will still come on. So I think at this point, why don't we skip forward to Michiko, if you want to introduce SDiane, and we'll start with SDiane.
Okay, I'm just going to read part of her blurb. Although I've known SDiane, we've known each other since the 80s. I met SDiane at the Yosemite the Women's Music Festival in Yosemite back in the 80s. I will not forget the day. Dr. SDiane Bogus is also known as the Oracle Shariananda, known primarily in the USA as a Black lesbian feminist poet and writer. She's been writing and performing since the 60s. As a daughter of the South, her background gave her a deep attachment to ritual and fundamental beliefs, which conflicted with her unfolding insistent lesbianism. Here started her search for God and truth and self-acceptance. Currently, SDiane lives in Copenhagen, Denmark, with her wife, Vivi Beauregard Adams. And here you go. Welcome. You're on mute, I think.
There, that better?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks, Michiko, for introducing me. I want to bless every single woman who's here and every single man who's here. I invited my brothers as well to listen in because they're extraordinarily able to listen. And so thank you for just being here. I think that there are things I probably should tell you, but I'm torn between reading and talking. So let me just say this much. You're looking at a person who has been diagnosed as a multiple personality. So I shift through my life a lot of times. And so when people say, well, I knew you used to be a musician, or I knew you when you were a poet or a teacher or some of that. So if all of that gets a little mixed up for you, it's because I've just tried to maintain my sanity while I grasp this reality and tried to hold on to it. So my Black lesbian identity and my spiritual identity are topmost in my way of being. So today I get to be SDiane again, whom I have not been in a while. I haven't published anything except for, well, I have published a book called The Book of Answers in the spiritual world. So I wanted to just have that understanding. There are lots of things I could read for you, but I'm going to read from something I haven't ever read from before, and I think you'll enjoy because of a reference. But I'm going to show my books. This is Diane's, which is probably the most popular of my books. Woman in the Moon, and Diane's has essays, poems, and the like. The Book of Answers, which is me doing clairvoyance and such things. Sapphire Sampler, which is a collection of all the different kinds of short stories, essays, poems. For the love of men, this I wrote for gay men in the 70s. All right, there you got to kind of look at some of the things, and this one was published by Pudd'nhead Press, and so it does some of my greatest hits. All right, now I've done that. My mother thanks you, my father thanks you, and I thank you for listening. All right, I'm going to read something to you called The Two-Penny Walk. The health gurus are always advising that we walk in order to strengthen our bodies, reduce stress, and maintain flexibility, and a weight that's appropriate for our body type and years. I agree, but in the matter of walking, there are so many more benefits. As an oracle, I tend to be alert to the unusual when I walk, and it is a practice that I naturally formed as a young person living in the South. Then, back in the 60s, I was being raised by my Birmingham parental side of the family. And one of the things about what a nice young lady did on Sunday and Saturday afternoons, of course, me and my girlfriends from church would take a leisurely stroll together. And this was the bonding and socialization that tended to reinforce my great joy in the company of women. And it gave me a chance to see who I was among my peers. There were about 8 of us, including myself. There was Mamie and her sister, Willie Ruth. Both were earthy and sensual in the church thrust up way that they could be. And there was Ida, who was quiet and self-conscious, but very aware. And there was Kathy, who did not walk with us often, but she was the proper snob among us, and she always struggled to be just one of the girls. There was Willie Mae Simmons, a girl who lived somewhere else, but visited often enough to be welcome because she brought a grace to our strolls. And then there was Shirley, who we all called by her entire name, Shirley Jackson, because she played the piano in church, seemed already to be a woman, and with her great large breasts and hippie backside, she regaled us with the news of her secret rendezvous with the handsome Ralph Lewis, who lived across the street from the church. We learned from her how we should be touched by our true love. And then there was Lena, a wiry, isolated girl who missed school a lot and who seemed always nervous and distracted. She was in those days the only person left in her home to care for her aging grandmother. But I can't tell you why. I do know the church sent emissaries with love and prayer and food and collection plate offerings from time to time. And Lena was able to come out every now and then to go on a walk with us. I was the chatterbox and the girl with the Chicago brogue. I provided worldly stories of my sordid and profligate life 13 years prior. I was given to exaggeration. The young women and my attachment to them arise out of my walk this morning, a pre-spring day in the first decade of the new century. I introduced them not to tell a particular tale, but to reveal the kind of meditation or spontaneous memories that bubble to the surface when I walk. This little reverie and short essay is meant to invite you to commune with yourself and see what comes up. Naturally, if you're reading this, you're probably already a devotee to your own spiritual, psychic, emotional, and psychological, physical health. More power to you. So I hope your encounter with this essay and its entertainment is an inspiration. One can derive so much simple joy and peace from a walk alone. Breathtaking insights, watching one's feet draw the future, each step into the present of advancement. There's a lesson in motion, in being in the present moment when walking. There's wholeness and the recognition of one's sovereignty as a being, as someone more than the demands of life and living. It compresses down the mechanics of step and breath to subtle and gross thought and memory. I think now of how the girls and I used to pass the various neighbors' houses, and out of custom and community mores, we'd sing out in a unified tone, good evening, how y'all doing? We might say every now and then we stop to chat with our elders, those sitting contentedly on their porches, taking in the gentle peace of the Lord's day or undisturbed, choreless Saturday afternoons. These elders, men and women, a few or one, a family or a straight honor uncle or older cousin or whoever the watchers were, they knew each of us girls from the habit of the walk, also from church. They knew most of our parents before we were born. Our little strolls were a ritual and a rite of passage. We were literally growing up under the influence of their watchfulness, and they were certain to report or gossip about anything that we might say or do that was unladylike. This was code for any of us being dressed improperly, sneaking a smoke, cussing, or stopping along the way to entertain the crafty advances of the neighborhood young men who tracked and timed our walks with the precision of Big Ben, the world's timepiece. We all knew the wages of sin were betrayal by any one of us, so we covered our tracks well enough. If Shirley was going to rendezvous with Ralph, you can be sure he'd be waiting at Jake's store, inside, when we came up and over the dusty red clay hill of Eureka Avenue. We'd leave her there and double back at a given time. Who was to say how many of us were walking that day? But it was risky. Who was to say who'd be in their store when we arrived to pick her up? But knowing that the community was not so big on doing shopping or much other stuff on Sunday, it was a pretty good bet that Shirley would be able to spend a little time with Ralph. Nice Christian girls we were. When I walk, I watch the appearance and disappearance of birds. Today, as I walk the circle convert between the housing track near my house and the neighborhood railroad, a California egret or heron stood like a statue in the marshy ditch that ran the length of the circular path. It was a brilliant white against the muddy, grassy backdrop, and I wondered at its solidarity. As my doggie Izzy and I approached, it took to flight, flying a few yards ahead of us each time we neared it. I started to feel drawn to something or something unseen. Why? Because I tend to live in the possibilities of spirit, in the wonderful idea that nature speaks to us. I like to believe that when I make myself available to spirit, its presence speaks, of course. I can be thought to be overly imaginative also. So to those who just may appreciate seeing a great California white egret for its beauty outside of a zoo or outside of a safari, I acquiesce that that is equally fulfilling. But this morning I wanted to take a path of wondrous clarity and splendiferous beauty that was opening before me. I was thinking that I myself am this bird moving away from familiar stations, away from uncertainty toward greater good, cautious about my health, but courageous enough to set myself a good pace and walk it. That egret came to an end of the marshy culvert, arched and pressed its slender, splayed wings against the air, winging back and forth from whence it came. It was an emissary or a companion on my short journey. It was a sign or an omen, like my daily walks. Now I'm going to skip ahead here. Before I made the critical turn back out into the roadway and into the city, where I would walk the final 4 blocks home on the sidewalk and not the soft, sandy track, Crow called to me. And I called back. There was a bit of laughter and a bit of magic to my way of seeing things. Crow is a creature of mystery and comes out of nowhere and goes to who knows where. It is seen when it wants to be seen. It is heard when it wants to be heard. And it warns and alerts and comments and decries. I have always respected Crow long before I began to know it as my own personal totem. Today, Crow told me, expect a surprise, a goodness, to use my gifts. How do I know? I can't say, but I came home and dashed off this essay. I do not understand my higher knowing. I do not dismiss my simple experience. I try to honor the magic and the mystic seen in every breathing experience. Back in the day when I was walking with my friends, telling my tales of once shoplifting candy at the local store or the fun of roller skating at the Chicago rinks that played live organ music, I was practicing for my calling, but these things were said to impress. I tell you these stories now to express. There's so much magic in the world, so much joy. Today I found a penny as I started off on my walk and found another one on the way home. This little luckiness is habitual. I tend to find pennies often, but especially two of them when I'm walking. When I was even younger than these times I recalled here, when we were kids, we would be discussing a matter, we'd always chant a disqualifying rhyme. One for the money, two for the show, three to get ready. Go, go, go. This is the first essay of a few discursive ones that I will put into this collection, Serpentine Fire. May they delight and please you, but more than this, may they enable you to share the mysticism of daily life. Thank you. Yourself.
Thank you so much, SDiane. That was truly beautiful. Appreciate you being here all the way from Denmark. And I do see that Blanche has joined us. So
Great.
Blanche, are you ready to go? Are you ready to read? Or do you want to wait for another person to read and then we can do you? You're muted, so I cannot tell what you're saying.
I'll wait.
You'll wait. All right. Thank you. I'm so glad that you made it.
Thank you.
So in that case, then we will move forward to Sharon, who I believe is next. Sharon and I met each other many, many moons ago when I was living in Minneapolis and she was there performing and doing her wonderful stuff. And it's such a joy to hear her voice and to hear her words. So, and she has many, many accolades. Sharon is a 2023 United States Artists Fellow. She's the winner of the Yale's Wyndham Campbell Prize in Drama. That was in 2022. In 2020 to 23, she's the Playwright Center's core member. And in 2022-23, she's a McKnight National Fellow and a 2022 AARP 50 over 50 awardee in the arts. It's too bad she's got nothing to do, right? She's a busy
That's right.
girl. She has received support from the Doris Duke Performing Artist Award, Creative Capital, MAP Fund, and the National Performance Network. Her work is featured in Feminist Studies number 48, number 1, which is honoring the 40 years of this bridge called My Back and But Some of Us Are Brave. And her new book, Bull Jean and Dem Day Back, was published by 53rd Street Press in 2022 and features 2 performance novels produced by Pillsbury House and Theater in Minneapolis. And welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. It's a real privilege to be here, to be able to be filled up by these brilliant artists who are sharing their work and their spirits and their journeys, by you organizers who worked so hard to bring us together, and by all of you present. The ground that has been broken, the blood in the fields, as they say, you know, it's like the way has been paved, and it is a privilege that I get to stand here and be in it with you. Also want to shout out and give great thanks to Lisa Moore. We call her Mother of the House of Redbone Press. Lisa published the Bull Jean stories in 1998, and we were able to set out in the country. At the time, there were so many independent bookstores. So we visited at least 35, maybe more, and then a couple of house parties. And then the club that I grew up in, the Catch, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, but Lisa blessed Bull Jean and I to move to 53rd State Press. And so I'm gonna read a short piece from Bull Jean and them, they back. The book has the original Bull Jean stories and then a new Bull Jean story called Bull Jean We Wake, which is what I'm gonna read from. Stax lay she voice out all up and around Juicy Lucy's. Big Bill stroked the piano. Bull Jean blow the jug. Together they move in slight sways with sounds that bust open the heart. Ever so slow, they step, sway, step, sway. Yes, sir, them, they keep everybody tilted and on edge. Them, they rock, we roll. They tilt, we quiver. Us, we raise, they swagger. All step, sway, step. Together we make black heat, smoke the entire joint till it crack like thunder. Yes, sir, we bring our own selves to a hallelujah crumble and wail. But what I want to talk about today is they old. That's right, folk rather fight than hear it said. But truth is, Bull Jean, Big Bill, Stax them, they old. Oh yeah, they look tasty, can still stew the room. But I hear they bones creaking. I feel they knees wobbling. I see the slow of day, and I remember when. And two, I know that Stax been sent here because great big mama want her to keep a check on they and them old asses. See, what had happened was Stax, who real name is Perciva Louise Badreau, she a itty bitty thing, look good enough to eat, so we call her Snacks. Anyway, Snacks is a child of one of the ones ain't never seen. One of them from great big mama from long line up. Snacks carried they strong. It is said that she have stopped many a real big men's with ill intentions storming towards she with a planted stare and stance, and that she done prayed many a fool back from stupid. Anyway, Stax got some of great big mama in her. It was Snacks that made Stax go to Dr. Black. Well, she made Stax go to great big mama who made Stax go to Dr. Black. Anyway, on this day, them, they rolling, we rocking, they tilting, we quivering. But before we could rise up from yonder come a vision. Who knew who it were? Were it a man's, a woman, neither or both? But what we did know, they would sure enough fine. They stroll on in, quiet the room with all they glory. Come up from back singing. All pause in wonder. Who that?
Thanks, Sharon. Did you have another one, or was that the one you were going to read?
I think that's it for right now. And that's the first time I've really read this out loud. So pardon my stacks and my snacks got all jumbled up, but I hope you were able to be with me.
No, that was very fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great.
So I think what
Thank you.
I think what we will do now is to move on to tech and talk at the same time is never a good idea. Blanche, I just saw you and now I lost you again. Here you are. I'm going to bring you up. Okay, there you are. So Blanche has agreed to read from Anne Allen Shockley, who I mentioned earlier gave her blessing for us to read from her work, but she was born in 1927 and she doesn't really want to have anything to do with Zoom, but she was happy to have her work represented here today. Anne Allen Shockley is an American journalist and author specializing in themes of interracial lesbian love, especially the plight of Black lesbians living under what she views as the triple oppression of racism, sexism, and homophobia. And she authored more than 30 short stories, novels, and articles that address the issues of racism and homophobia. And I will put the rest of her bio into the chat. Blanche is a member of OLOC and has been for quite some time and has been a strong advocate for women's land and lesbian land and many other projects. And I'm very grateful, Blanche, that you agreed to read Anne's work for us today.
Okay. I'm not muted. Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. Go ahead.
All right. This is when Renee met Terry. Terry had entered her life one warm Saturday night, 2 weeks after she started playing at the club. The place was filled with people. Rosaika had asked her to play longer. Requests were stacked high on the silver tray atop the piano, and the tips were growing heavier. Rosaika came up to her little elevated stand with its single soft spotlight and whispered that a lady at the table in the far left corner had a request. He handed her a crisp $20 bill with the note. The woman must be very important for Rosaika to be concerned. The tall one in the corner, she's quite famous, I hear. Terry was in the corner sitting beneath one of the bronze lamps jutting out from the cherry paneled wall. When she saw Renee looking, a slight smile crossed her face. With Terry was a young woman, a tiny blonde with upswept hair and red pouting lips. She also would like for you to join them later, please. Rosaika's dark Italian eyes pleaded as he nervously smoothed back his hair. He knew Renee did not mingle with the customers. She is a writer and brings many friends here. They are very generous. Oh, all right, she couldn't refuse him. He had been nice to her, and after all, it was a woman and not one of the many men on the make. At least Rosaika kept them away. She looked down at the note, a request for Debussy. The woman was making fun of her. A nigger knows nothing about but blues and jazz. But it was a $20 bill. She had accepted it, and she certainly needed it. She paused reflectively. Then she began Clair de la Lune, remembering how she used to play it. A stillness enveloped the room as if all were startled by the music coming from the sad Black girl in the bargain basement black dress with dime store accessories. When she finished, there was a long burst of applause. She felt better than she had in a long while. She left the stand, making her way among the round tables covered with white linen cloths. The woman smiled from gray eyes, which seemed to have fallen endless depths. To her surprise, the blonde companion had gone. Hello, I'm Terrace Boulevard. Everyone calls me Terry. Sit down. Renee, isn't it? Would you like a drink? A whiskey sour, please. I love music. It's a relief to come here and just hear a piano instead of those awfully jarring combos with their far out sounds. You play well. Why did you ask me to play Debussy? Why? Because I like him. Why else? Besides, you seem as if you could do justice to him. There's a subtlety to his music that demands special sensitivity on the part of the pianist. You sounded like you had it. I wasn't wrong. Something in the woman's voice was quieting Renee's anger. I thought you were making fun of me. Most white people do make fun of us, you know. We are the clowns in your circus. The words came out in a bitter gush. She was a little shocked at herself. The woman's look of surprise disappeared as quickly as it had come. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. After a while, the woman asked, are you usually this quiet, or perhaps you would prefer I change my skin color? I can't do the latter, but I wish I could, if it would make you feel any better toward me. There was something about the woman, an undercurrent, like electricity. She looked for rings and saw none. I don't usually go around with a chip on my shoulder. I'm glad. Then she began to talk in the most natural and knowledgeable way about music and musicians. How long since she had talked of music with anyone? She even forgot the woman was white and obviously important. She only knew the woman had an uncanny way of making her feel comfortable and relaxed. She accepted another drink, then had to leave to pick up Denise. The next Saturday night, she saw the woman at the same table. She nodded, played Debussy without a request, and on her break, walked to the corner table, surprised at her boldness and desire to do so. I'm glad you came over, Renee. I'm feeling very lonely tonight. Would you like to go for a drive with me when you're finished? Later, outside, the humid air tinted us subtly of rain, but Terry released the top of the white convertible and took a deep breath. Ah, fresh air. I love it. Terry was a good driver. Onto the winding, secluded road following the river. She parked beside the bank and turned slightly toward Renee. A bridge loomed high overhead, suspended in space. They could see the flashing car lights like zooming fireflies, while below, the water made muted sounds of its own. You're married, aren't you? Yes. Children? A little girl, Denise. But you don't love him. You wouldn't be taking a night drive with me if you did. You would hurry home like a dutiful wife. I'm wealthy. I'm used to getting what I want, even if it means buying it. You've probably guessed, or else you're terribly naive. I'm one of those women who prefers her own sex, and I want you. However, I want you for real, but I won't bother you if you don't want me to. I'll be happy just to have you as a friend, knowing you and enjoying your talent. But if you ever need me, I'll be waiting. Conscious of the words, not surprised by them, but slightly bewildered, the strangeness of it. I've startled you. Perhaps you didn't know. How old are you, Renee? 27, she repeated. I won't pressure you. Renee thought silently. Pressure her? Was pressure needed when an obstacle wasn't there? During the long drive back, both were silent, each absorbed in her own block of thought. Renee picked up Denise after school, then stopped to see Fran, leaving Denise in the car to prevent her from childishly blurting out where they were staying. Fran opened the door, started staring at Renee in surprise. Renee, where have you been? She should have let Fran know she was all right. Let me tell you so. I just started dinner, such as it is. I'm going back on Weight Watchers again next week. Shoving a tray of French fries into the oven. This week, I thought I'd live it up. Your weight looks all right to me, Renee commented, remembering that Fran was always on and off with Weight Watching. Sit down, Fran said, pulling up a chair to the kitchen table. Your husband came by last night looking for you. She sat down feeling a little surprised at the mention of Jerome Lee. Why should he be looking for her? A bird out of the cage? The cat ready to pounce? Yes, Jerome Lee, unless you got another one stashed away someplace. He wasn't exactly the most sober man in the world. He said that you had left him. He accused me of having you hidden in the closet, under the bed. One hell of a time convincing him I didn't. By the way, Renee, just where are you staying? If that's any of my business. With a friend, Renee said quietly. It would be best for Fran not to know. Fran's life was men, and nothing but men. She had a string beaded with them, and she shifted the beads around at will. Men were almost a hobby with her. For her to be in love with a woman who was white and a lesbian, Fran would never understand. Her love for Terry would have to be a secret hidden even from her best friend. She was now heeding the first lesson of her new existence. It's a scare, or you leaving him for good? No scare, Fran. I'm leaving him for good. he's just no good. I would have left him long ago. But another guy on the hook? Oh, no one. Why does there have to be another man for a woman to leave? Well, as pretty as you are, it won't take long. Just try not to get another jackass like him. If he comes back here loud talking me again, I'm going to have him put out. I'm sorry, friend. I hope he doesn't bother you anymore. Why don't you just stay for dinner, honey? There's enough. No, thanks. I have to go. Renee, just got a wonderful idea. Why don't you and Denise drive home with me when school's out? You can see your mother, maybe even decide to stay. The small, comfortable frame house filled with pleasant memories, baking smells embedded in the walls, and warm laughter and love suspended from the ceiling. Her childhood had been left there where an adult world would never fit. I just stopped by to let you know I'm all right. I'm glad you didn't. I was worried as hell after seeing Jerome leave. Be careful. I wouldn't trust him an inch. You still want me to keep Denise at night? Renee shook her head. Thanks, but it won't be necessary. Fran glanced away at her and then back. Let me know if there's anything you want me to do. Take care of yourself. Renee kissed her lightly. Don't worry about us. We're fine. Better than we've ever been and happier. I'll stop by again soon.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, Michiko.
Thank you, Blanche. That was great.
Thank you.
Okay, now I want to introduce Penny Mickelbury. I just met her 4 days ago, but 3 days ago. 3 days ago. But I've read her book. I've read her mystery books for sure. Penny Mickelbury is the author of 12 mystery novels in 3 different series, 2 historical fiction novels, and a short story collection. She's also authored 2 novels of historical fiction, with the 3rd due from Bywater Books in late 2023. The former Washington, D.C.-based newspaper, radio, and television reporter was inducted into the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame in 2019. Penny Mickelbury is an Atlanta native currently living in LA. Welcome, Penny.
It is so wonderful to be in such magnificent company. I have no words except to say that I truly am honored and I am pleased and delighted to be able to share my work with you. I can't sing, and I can only do words, but I do them out of love and with love. And I wrote mysteries for many years, and for a lot of reasons that kind of slowed down, and I turned to historical fiction because I love history as much as I love mysteries. I'm going to read from the opening pages of Two Wings to Fly Away, which came out in 2019. The sequel to this book comes out in December of this year, published by Bywater. So these are just the opening pages, and I will ask you to bear with me and indulge me because I do have some vision issues. I love the name of OLOC, and my response to the age question is, who are you calling old? And then it occurred to me, They're talking to me. So it's like, okay, I can do that. I will do that because it certainly beats the alternative. But along with that comes a couple of issues. One of them is my eyes got older than I did. So bear with me as I try to keep up with the words on this page. Slave catcher. The hissed word hung in the air, freezing Eugenia Oliver's insides, colder than the damp November evening air chilled her skin. Though Eli's bare feet made no sound on the worn cobblestones and his two brief words were whispered, Jeannie's body reverberated as if a cannon had been fired next to her. She was headed home. She was almost there, almost safe and warm. But she changed direction and walked toward Main Street. The fast, loud pounding of her heart and her suddenly dry mouth were her fear manifested. If a slave catcher really was prowling in the quarter, and Jeannie really was walking toward him instead of running away, dressed as Eugene Oliver, as she often was, because a black man was safer than a black woman alone, she moved with purpose toward the danger coming her way. The white man slowed his gait from a trot to a long-legged stride as he entered Thatcher Lane, definitely looking for someone. His head swiveled from side to side, his eyes searched but found nothing but shuttered windows and barred doors. Jeannie was annoyed with herself. She should have heard the danger in the silence. It was supper time in Thatcher Lane. There should have been the clamor of children and women, the clatter of horses and wagons. There should have been the call of the lamplighter. Instead, there was the silence of fear that only the presence of a white man could bring, and the anger. That was more dangerous than the fear. Jeannie took a deep breath and caressed the Derringer pistol in her pocket. She and the white man were close together now. She knew her neighbors could see her as clearly as a stranger. She also knew that inside half a dozen of the barred and shuttered houses were pistols and shotguns aimed at the white man. If he were foolish enough or arrogant enough to come alone into their lane looking for runaway slaves, he would die foolish and arrogant. And then they all would die. Worse than that, because even in Philadelphia, the killing of a white person was the most unforgivable of transgressions. They would die and their homes would be burned to ashes. Jeannie shivered, and November was not to blame. This man, however, was no slave catcher. Jeannie was certain of that, though she could not imagine who he was, and certainly not what he wanted. Not in this area of Philadelphia, inhabited solely by blacks, free and otherwise. The man removed his hat as Jeannie approached, nodded a greeting, and spoke before she could speak. "Good evening, sir." Jeannie returned the greeting, adding a question. "Have you lost your way?" "I've lost a boy I was chasing." "Is the boy a thief?" "Why, no, not that I'm aware." "Ah, if not a thief, then why was I chasing him?" "A good question, and I've a good answer." The man spoke confidently. "He has information I need, but he ran when I approached him. I chased him and saw him turn into this lane. Perhaps you saw him." And the man described Eli as if he possessed an artist's etching of the boy. Jeannie studied the stranger. His clothes were well made and of good quality, though not the clothes of a wealthy man. But confidence aside, he seemed too worldly to be naive enough to chase a black man into his own residential quarters, given the unrest of times, not to mention the encroaching darkness. "Do you know where you are, sir?" "I am lost, to tell the truth." He allowed his words to trail off as he looked very closely at the black man to find the deeper meaning of his question. "I know I'm in the black quarter, if that's what you're asking." "The boy you were chasing thinks you're a slave catcher." "Good God!" Jeannie watched the surprise spread across the man's chiseled features, and then the revulsion, and finally the denial. "I am nothing of the sort. It is a heinous and cruel occupation, worthy of... I can think of no worthy punishment." Jeannie could think of several worthy punishments, but she dared not speak them. After all, the stranger was a white man, even if not a slave catcher. Will you walk with me out to the main street, sir, so the lamplighter can begin his duties and the people resume theirs? Jeannie turned and walked slowly out of the dark lane. She had turned her back to a white man, a stranger. She hoped he would follow. The stranger turned a scrutinizing gaze on his location. Houses lined both sides of the narrow street, and even in the swiftly falling dusk, he could see they were well tended, as were the tiny gardens that fronted them. He noticed slight movement at several curtained windows and the dark roundness of at least 2 long gun barrels aimed at him. Smoke rose from practically every chimney, yet no lamplight was visible in any of the more than 24 houses of various shapes and sizes that fronted the street. Dark within and without, as the lamplighter stood silent and watchful and fearful, and he himself was the cause of the darkness and the fear. He hurried to catch up to Jeannie. Boston and New York have gas lights in the streets, he muttered, as much to have something to say as to cover the shame he felt at causing so much unnecessary discomfort. As does Philadelphia, Jeannie answered in a reasonable, if sad, subdued tone, just a bit west and south of here. The stranger grunted acknowledgement of that truth and an understanding of the reason for it. He and Jeannie stood at the intersection of the lane and the main road, where the already lit oil lamps were smoking and sputtering. They cast a golden glow on the carriages and carts, shops and stores of the wide avenue that ran perpendicular to Thatcher Lane. It was a mostly commercial avenue, though there were a few houses, all of which appeared to be owned by a colored person. Not only was this avenue unfamiliar to him, it was foreign to him. It was a fully functional commercial street, and before this moment, he had not known it existed. I am Ezra Mackay, he said, extending his hand. I apologize to you and your neighbors. I meant you no harm. Eugene Oliver is my name, and your apology is accepted, Jeannie replied, returning the firm grip. And if I can help you, Mr. Mackay, talk to that boy for you, I will, unless you intend to bring harm to him. And then you'll not help? I will not. The sequel to this book will be out in December. Compliments and my thanks to Bywater Books, and thank you all.
Keep up the good work. Excellent.
Thank you so much, Penny. And so now what we're going to do is I'm going to spotlight our presenters, our speakers. I can find everybody here. We've turned off the video recording. JR, can you make sure the video recording is turned off? And what we're going to do now is to